What's up guys, today I'm going to be teaching the wild community about something that they desperately need to learn, and that is how to properly play Mindrender Illucia. So first I'm going to teach you how to use Illucia generally, and then I'm going to give you specific situations in which you can use Illucia to win games outright. But first, I just wanted to say that I've been putting a lot more effort into the videos recently, and if you guys appreciate that effort, then I would appreciate it very much if you left a like on this video, comment, and follow me on Twitch, where I stream every single night at midnight PST. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about using Mindrender Illucia specifically in the case of Reno Priest, and if you're interested in the list, I have it posted in the description. You're welcome. So in general, there are a few different ways that you'll find yourself using Illucia most frequently. One of the most common ways to use her, and a way that you may have figured out already, is that if you are going first, she is a fantastic play on turn 3, where you can usually steal your opponent's coin and sometimes play a 1-drop. This also gives you definitive information about what your opponent is about to play, and for the most part, your cards are not going to be helpful to your opponent. Your opponent also won't be able to play your important cards like Spawn, Raza, or Anduin because they simply don't have the mana, making this an extremely safe play no matter what. This is not a particularly good play against aggro unless you hit that 1-drop and are really expecting it, but if you have no other options, it's pretty good because it forces your opponent not to play anything aggressive on turn 3. The second way that you can use Illucia most frequently is to use her in the mid-game when you have not drawn your most important cards. Say you don't have Spawn in hand, you don't have Raza, and you don't have Anduin, or maybe you have Anduin but you don't have the mana to play it yet. You can use Illucia and then you're only risking that your opponent top decks that card and has the mana to play it. With certain decks, this is just simply how you have to play Illucia, and it can win you so many games, especially against specific matchups, which we'll get into later. One of my favorite ways to use Illucia, and one that does require a little bit of creativity, most frequently against Mage, when you get your opponent to 0 health, but they have Ice Block. Because they have Ice Block, what you can do is, after reducing them to lethal damage, play Illucia, and then make sure you don't have Reno in hand. That way, your opponent is given a hand that simply doesn't heal them, and they have no choice but to roll over. This works both with Ice Block and without Ice Block in the case that you simply don't have the reach to get there. Oftentimes, you can play Illucia and find the reach, and if you don't find the reach, then you know that your opponent won't have the heal to make up for it anyway. And the last general way that you can use Illucia is you can use her very late game as a last resort win condition, where you dump all of your cards and abuse the value of your Anduin hero power, and then play Illucia to see and use, hopefully, your opponent's remaining cards. Your opponent is essentially forced to take the turn off, and they even take fatigue damage if you have no cards left in your deck. And of course, the last way is to disrupt your opponent's singular win condition. Now this is a bit more general, so let's talk specifics. Against Kingsbane Rogue, one of the most simple, easy, and fun ways to win games with Illucia is just to play Illucia and take your opponent's Kingsbane. Once you've stolen the Kingsbane, the game is basically over as long as your health total is stable, and so generally I would recommend keeping Illucia in hand to force them to play the Kingsbane every turn. Sometimes they simply won't be able to do this, or will think that you don't have Illucia in hand, and then you just win the game. Against Reno Lock, most of the time these days, Reno Locks are running the Finley Wizard combo, and because that combo deletes your hero power, it basically deletes your win condition. So what you have to do is typically you're going to play Polkelt at some point, you're going to play Raza, and then you're going to have Anduin in hand. Well, if you could manage to get Illucia in this current hand, then what you want to do is you want to play Illucia when your opponent will have 7 mana on the turn following. This means that you give the Reno Lock as many draws as possible to find either Finley or Wizard, and that way, as long as you play one of those cards, it should disrupt their combo entirely. Oftentimes, they will have a lot of combo disruption outside of that, but be careful that you don't use the combo disruption on yourself, considering that you've swapped hands and decks. Against Reno Mage, the win condition is pretty simple. Typically, they're going to want to play Pocket Galaxy early and then draw a bunch of 1-cost minions and blow you out in one big turn. Now, this is good, but if they manage to play the Pocket Galaxy, draw a couple cards, and you notice they don't play any of those minions, that's the time to Illucia. Without Illucia, you are in a lot of trouble if they get Pocket Galaxy down early, but with Illucia, you can just play those cards for yourself and your opponent simply doesn't get them. Let's say they've been sitting on something like a Luna all game, you can play the Luna and all of a sudden they don't have the draw that they need to get through the deck. Now, against Priest, Illucia can be pretty tricky. You can use her early on, like I mentioned earlier, to maybe steal the coin, steal a 1-drop, or something like that. But there is another very silly thing that you can do that not many people know about. And this is that you can Illucia your opponent, and if they have Seance in hand, you can Seance the Illucia and play Illucia again, and you've effectively played their Seance and any other cards that you can fit in for free. Your hand gets returned to you, and your opponent never gets a chance to respond. Let's give him a Temple Enforcer. Alright, just as bad. And it's as if nothing happened. Let's go. Now, against Combo Druid, this is a pretty common matchup these days. What you want to do is you want to find the perfect time to Illucia to play as many zero-cost mana gains as possible. Oftentimes you won't find your opponent sitting on 10 mana for multiple turns, but of course if you do, that's typically the time to play it. If you have a coin in your hand, or if your opponent has just one Innervate and one Lightning Bloom, you can play one of your opponent's 10 mana minions. And if you find the right minion to play, that can end the game versus them. So for Combo Druid, I would recommend holding on to Illucia a little bit later in the mana curve than you typically do, to try and play one of their 10 mana minions or all of their 0-cost cards. Now last but certainly not least, we have Quest Mage. So Quest Mage is a very interesting matchup because I personally think that when the Priest draws Illucia, they are significantly favored in the matchup. This is a huge reversal to what I would have called about an 80-20 matchup before. It's hard to say exactly what percentage the Priest is when they draw Illucia, but I know it's solidly over 60 or so. However, I see a lot of Priests messing this up, and make no mistake, this is your only way to beat Quest Mage as a Priest. So here's what you need to do. You need to play Illucia between turns 4 and 6. Typically, your opponent is going to stack up a lot of coins and spells in the early turns by playing their 2-drops and drawing, and then they will typically plan for a power spike around turns 4 through 6. These power spikes almost always revolve around playing Sorcerer's Apprentice and dumping their cheapest spells. So what you need to do is you need to steal their Sorcerer's Apprentice, their coins, and play as many of their cards as possible. The new 8-spell requirement for Quest Mage is actually quite difficult to hit if you ruin one of these swing turns. This might leave them one additional swing turn for the rest of the game while you build up tempo, and oftentimes that single swing turn is not enough to even complete the quest. I see so many people greed Illucia and wait for the opponent to complete the quest, but any smart Quest Mage player that sees a Priest that hasn't played Illucia yet is not going to complete the quest, because why would they? They simply don't need to complete the quest. Again, there is no reason to save Illucia for the quest. You must play Illucia between turns about 4 and 6 depending on the number of coins in hand and your opponent's activity. If you manage to dump their hand, you pretty much win every time. Sometimes you'll mess up and you'll just see that they have 4 giants in hand and there's not much you can play, but that's okay because you probably don't win those games anyway. Okay, so I think that covers all of the most common situations that you need to know playing Illucia versus all of the meta decks in Wild. If you guys have any other situations that you're curious about or stuff to add to what I said today, then please put it in the comments section for others to enjoy.